What's up, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy. Excited to be with you again today on our podcast episode. And today I bring my brother Mark back on. I know he's a regular, but he has a ton of knowledge, and I love bringing him on here as a fellow civil engineer with the experience that he has. So today we wanted to dive into how to make your virtual meetings better. We got some tips and tools on how to really make those things shine. We know the pandemic has been crazy, and everybody's switched over to doing virtual meetings, which hopefully everybody's got some of the stuff under their belt already. But I'm positive there's some tips we have in here to make those meetings better for you. And frankly, I just don't think the technology is going to go away anytime soon or replace. I mean, they might even have in person plus the technology, Zoom, Teams, whatever it is, all there together. So anyway, those are my thoughts. But this episode is going to detail some of those things, how to really make these things improved for our virtual meetings. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. That's going to be coming right up after this. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy. I got Mark back on. What's up, Mark?
Hey, glad to be back. You know, it's always a good time when I'm on, right?
Oh, I know. We got you on. You're a frequent because, well, I'm your brother, and we're part of this gig, so let's do it.
Yeah, I love it.
Today we want to talk about how to make our virtual meetings better. There's definitely some tips that we can give. Obviously, COVID has been a big part of people moving their meetings to an online format. Seems like everyone and their dog is doing Zoom, but obviously there's Teams and there's a host of other platforms as well. But I think during these unusual times, I don't know if this technology is going to go away. I think it just accelerated the use of it and people getting used to it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Mark, what do you think about what the pandemic has done and really kind of what we need to do as we prepare or really try to have good virtual meetings?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it used to be, I think, at least in my experience, the underlying expectation for meetings was that they were going to be in person, It's better to get together. We're going to get that personal interaction, and I'm going to get to know you. You're going to get to know me. And that was the underlying expectation. Now I think after the pandemic, that's completely shifted. And now the underlying expectation is, well, if we got to have meetings, and my big thing in my business are the OAC meetings, right? The owner, architect, contractor meetings. And now they're just, the underlying premise is that those are going to be Zoom meetings or team, Microsoft team meetings or whatever platform you use. They're just going to be online. And so we've kind of lost that, I think, that expectation that meeting in person is what we're going to do. And now it's just going to be all online. That's what we're going to do. And there's pluses and minuses to that, obviously. And so we want to talk about how to make them the best they can be, right? And in saying that, we're trying to emulate as best we can the in-person experience, right?
Yes.
That's what we're trying to emulate.
So, yeah, I think as part of that, you have to learn the technology that you're using, which can be a big deal. But I think part of that process is being able to master it. So I think when these Zoom meetings first started, people discovered really quickly that maybe we shouldn't have everybody unmuted, but maybe what are your thoughts around that when you're trying to emulate a live event? It just seems like when you're virtual, those nuances creep up.
Yeah, I think that all stems on how many participants are you going to have at your meeting. And I've heard rules of thumb, like if you're going to have 15 or more, then you need to start thinking about muting people. But if it's 15 or less, maybe you don't. And I know there's problems with that. I get people that are at home and, you hear their dogs barking in the background, or maybe they have young kids and they're running in and out of the room, and those kind of things. And it's distracting, But if you know who's participating and you got Bob and you got Susan and you got, Fred, and they're zooming in from home, but that maybe they're not going to have those types of distractions. Keep it unmuted so that it is more of a personal experience. But you kind of got to play that one by.
Yeah, I've been to meetings where, I used to run meetings where it felt like half the company on, because it was a big scoping review, and you have to mute everybody, because there's just no way you're gonna get through that. So right. Yeah, I think that's a takeaway, is that you're trying to emulate these. When you're setting these things up, you want to emulate them to be as realistic to a live event, a live meeting, in-person experience as possible. And there probably is a cutoff where you do need to mute everybody when you're coming in, and that's something you'll have to pay attention to as you're going through this.
Yep.
Let's talk about the setup. So, with every meeting that you're going to go virtual, you got to set this thing up. And obviously, you need to prepare your attendees in advance about the notice of doing this, which should be a no-brainer in today's day, when things are always coming up this way. So, and you can set up some ground rules that way too, as you're setting up the meeting, in terms of maybe if you want people muted, et cetera. So,
yeah, what I've done successfully on my Zoom meetings, and again, I'm talking about these OAC meetings that I do a lot of, is preparing an agenda, and then sending that out before the meeting starts, so everybody is kind of clued in on what we're going to discuss during the meeting, and they're kind of prepared beforehand and sometimes on that agenda, there's assignments for other people. Maybe, the design team, maybe they're going to address a certain issue that we need to talk about. They know that that's coming up. And if I issue an agenda, and then while we're going through the agenda, I make my meeting minutes or my notes as we're going through the meeting right there on the agenda. And I'll use, I don't use Google Docs. I'm an Office, Microsoft Office guy. So I use Office 365, and I'm usually sharing that document across for everybody that I need to have contribute to the meeting minutes, and I'll let them add things that they need to, so that they're actively participating in the process, and that kind of helps them keep guys engaged. I found that works really well, but I think using those those platforms, and I know Google Docs is a pretty good one too, where you're actually sharing the documentation across the platform, so everybody's involved. Is a good way to go.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think also as part of that you, I use Microsoft OneNote a lot, and that's also a platform that's really easy to take notes on, get polish up real quick, and send that out again, and even have other people collaborate on. So I've really enjoyed using that one. As part of setting this all up, you also need to make sure you fully understand the technology that you're using. And if that requires a little bit of something to do beforehand, set up a test meeting, then you probably should do that. But you don't want to be fumbling around with all the options. If, I'm talking about making a very smooth meeting. Obviously, there's probably some rough startup there, but
well, and that's something that's getting less and less, I'll say, tolerable, right? People are less understanding about whoever's conducting the meeting not being able to manage.
How do I go about sharing?
What's going on here? How do I share my screen? So if you're going to be in charge of a meeting, do a little homework and play with the software, and maybe you're calling up the technical support if you've got questions. Do a little prep before you jump in.
And I've even had meetings, like everybody uses Zoom, but I've had to change the format of those type of meetings too. So instead of just a meeting where everybody can join and everyone has their own ability to unmute and share their video and all that stuff, I've had to change those meetings where it's been strictly like a webinar, where people don't have any access to do any of those things except the person presenting can share their stuff. So everyone comes in muted and can't really do much but type in a chat room. So it's helpful to really understand the technology that you're using so you can make adjustments where you need to and help the meeting go smoother in itself.
So what if you did like a test run? Like, let's say you're getting prepped for maybe a pretty high profile meeting. There's going to be some, I don't know, we'll call them decision makers, maybe some higher profile individuals at this meeting that you want to make things run smoothly, and you want a little bit of, maybe you do a little rehearsal. What is there anything wrong with that, you think?
There's nothing wrong with that.
Maybe
I've done that a lot.
2 or 3 friends and say, hey, just log into this meeting and
I want to test some stuff out. Yeah. Can you join me? You get a coworker.
Even if you just get some feedback on what the presentation looks like. What does the screen look like on your end, Yep,
exactly. What options do you have? What can you click on? All those things are really good to test out. So that's just all part of getting to know the software. So definitely something you're going to want to do with virtual meetings to help them definitely run smoother. Another thing that you can do to help, or I think, have a meeting run smoother is break up responsibilities. If you know there's going to be quite a few people chatting in a chat room and you've got a presenter, maybe you want to delegate other people or have like a co-host or something where you have responsibilities given to others to help run the show.
Yes.
Depending on the size.
And you know what, the big thing that I've seen when you and I have done some of those things, if we think about some of our live sessions that we've done, and I think it just helps break up some of the monotony, right? I think when you're going through material or you're going through items on an agenda, you're kind of trying to break things up into chunks. And so you're like, okay, here's the topic. We need to get through this specific topic, and we're going to spend, 15, 20 minutes on this topic, and then we're going to move to the next one. If you break things up in chunks like that, I think that's beneficial to keep everybody engaged and keep their attention. But if you've got this co-host or this other team member that you can bounce things off of as you go along, maybe you're taking the first chunk, and then your co-host, your partner, is taking the next chunk. And just by switching off, that adds a little variety, and I think it really helps emulate more of that personal experience.
I agree totally. I think it also is as you're preparing for a meeting, you can even get really creative if you wanted to. Some people try to set the mood for the meeting. You could even have music if you can do that, and that's one of those things you might have to test out and do. But you can really set the mood for a meeting depending on who your audience is. Those are just some ideas.
That's getting fancy. Yeah, that's getting really fancy.
So I want to dive into now how to, I guess, keep people's attention going during the meeting. How do we keep, I guess, a human connection here?
So I think I've mentioned one of the big ones, which is keeping the information kind of broken down into chunks so that you're switching gears as you're going through the material. It's not just presented as this one long, arduous agenda, from item 1 down through item 10 or however long it is. It's chunk number 1, and we talk about it. We get through that, and then you have some kind of a transition that's like, okay, now we're going to move on to this one, and my colleague Susan is going to take over, and she's going to talk about this. Whatever. You need to have some kind of a transition between topics so it doesn't just seem like one arduous list of items that you're going through.
I agree. I think another thing that will really help is if you can, to keep people's attention, is if you can present, or if you're in a meeting that you're not too dull. Maybe you've got a little bit of energy going on. Maybe you've, if you drink your Red Bull or whatever it's going to be in the morning,
right.
You want to present with a little bit of energy to keep people's attention. If it's a routine thing and you're coming in, I've even joked around a little bit in some of the meetings. Everyone has, the regular meetings that you have probably every single week.
Yeah, I have them every week.
Sometimes you get a little icebreaker or something just to change that energy a little bit.
Yeah, and you know what else works really well is if after you've and this takes you have to get to know individuals a little bit for this to work, but you can start calling them on, by name. If you're dealing with a certain issue on your agenda and you're like, hey, Bob, I know that you dealt with this, last week. And why don't you tell us about how you handled it? Or, ask people specifically in your meeting, calling them out by name and asking them for comments, keep them engaged.
Yeah, I'm sure there are people that dominate typical meetings too. Yeah. There's always that guy that is probably more vocal than the rest of the group.
The smartest guy in the room, right?
Yeah. But if you're trying to get ideas out of people or get feedback on something out of people, I think it's important to know people by their name. And frankly, if you're using these virtual meetings, you should see their names as they pop in anyway. So, you should have a list of attendees right there in front of you. If you can't pronounce somebody's name, that's another thing. But, call them out by name, get some ideas from people, and make sure everybody's voice can be heard. It doesn't matter, if they're the loudest voice or the quietest voice. You can get everyone to participate.
Sometimes I've heard of that called, flatten your meeting, make everybody kind of equal across the platform, make everybody equal participants in the meeting, flatten your meeting.
I hadn't heard that before.
And that'll keep people engaged. But
how about showing your face, Mark?
Well, I think that's important for everybody to show their face. I know, and again, it may be kind of dictated by how many participants are being involved. Like you were talking about, if you're doing more of a webinar type presentation where you got hundreds of people that are logging in, then of course that doesn't make sense. But if it's a typical meeting where you're, within 15 people or so, yeah, I think it makes sense to have everybody showing their face. And it just to be able to emulate that personal experience that we're trying to get here. Now, a lot of people don't want to do that because they're trying to multitask, right?
Yeah.
They don't want they don't want to see that you're looking on your other screen and you're clicking on your email or whatever, and you're not fully engaged, That may be the reason why
that may be like 90% of the people on these meetings.
Yeah. They're like, oh, now I can go to a meeting on Zoom and I can, do whatever else on the side. But you want to discourage that because that means they're not fully participating, and you would try to discourage that in a normal person to person or an in-person meeting. So
yeah, you're not going to be, checking out your phone and checking out Facebook when you're in a meeting with other people if you're together live, Yeah. So I don't think, to give the same respect and to have an engaging meeting, you may address that in your meetings to try to
and you may outline that, we're talking about sending out expectations or sending out an agenda beforehand. Maybe that's one of the things you're outlining in your agenda, your advertisement for your meeting, whatever that is. Just say, hey, we expect everybody to be on video so we can see your face. That's just so we can make it more personal,
and try hard not to multitask.
And try hard not to multitask and tell them up front, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Me neither. I also think another good idea, just to engage people that are coming in, is that you can have polls. If you've got some questions you can ask, that really, gets people participating early. Let's say it's just a first time meeting. You don't know anybody, or if it's not one of these habitual meetings that you've got every single week, but you can do polls, and those are always fun to see where people are at. We do polls all the time. If you come to one of our live webinars that we run,
that's a cool thing you do.
We do that for the Civil PE and the Civil FE exam. So we do some polls, see when people are taking the exam or see what depth exam they're taking. And that just kind of gets the audience engaged with what you're doing, which is good. Those are all things to keep attention.
It's a good icebreaker, right? And if you were in more of a business setting and not in maybe like a training session, like we're talking about, like when we do our live sessions, but just make it something goofy, like, what's your favorite cake, or what's your favorite flavor ice cream, or
what Netflix show did you binge last
what
weekend?
did you binge watch last weekend? What, just something funny like that, and just to keep people engaged.
Yeah, I agree, and that all just affects the energy of the room. I think also, if people are bringing up items or topics that you can parking lot. So when if someone's bringing up stuff that you can talk about later, you can do the same thing in virtual meetings where you can address those at a different time or with those individuals, just to make sure that you're staying on your agenda, just like a real meeting, which would be a good thing. So, cool. Mark, any other tips? Any last second tips on keeping our virtual meetings?
I would just caution that, just one last comment. I would say that, we have so many online meetings nowadays that it's easy to get burnt out. You get Zoom fatigue, if you want to call it that. But
that is a real thing.
Yeah, I've caught myself into that in that category. Just, oh man, another meeting, and it gets. And because they're so convenient to set up, usually, the number of the meetings has increased, at least in my work. And sometimes, man, I'm on my third or fourth, fifth. I've had 5 of them in one day before, and it starts getting monotonous. So doing some of these things that we're talking about kind of helps prevent some of that from happening.
And I will say, like, if you've gone to enough of these meetings, you can tell people that are like on top of it and are really trying to make an effort versus those that aren't. And usually the ones that aren't are the meetings you probably don't care to attend.
Or you regret. Yeah. You don't want to even participate. It's just blah. But if you've done some of the things that we've talked about, and they know it's going to be a little more of a high energy meeting and it's going to be more interactive, those are the meetings that you're like, all right, this is going to be fun. I like these guys, because
sweet.
We had a good time last time. And
just like this podcast,
it.
Come on and check it out. Keep you engaged.
Righto.
Okay. Well, sweet, man. I think we shared a lot of tips today. I think a lot of people will get some value out of how to run meetings maybe a little more effectively. Hopefully it's just brought some awareness to maybe the meetings either you're attending, or you could give advice to help others make them more engaging, or yourself make them more engaging as well. So, Marks, thanks for jumping on again.
You bet. Anytime, man.
Okay. We'll talk to you later.
We'll see ya.
See ya.